بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين فصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم من المؤمنين رجال صدقوا ما حد الله عليه فمنهم من قضى نحبه ومنهم من ينتظر وما بدلوا تبديلا صدق الله العظيم. Karbala has brought with it another great tragedy. A tragedy that is unknown to you or I, unassuming and invisible. A tragedy hostile to our histories, thoughts, and emotions. A tragedy, when learnt, we loathe to admit. It is the tragedy of how Hussein has been remembered and our inability to be inspired by Hussein. Ritualized and polemicized, Karbala and Ashura have become references not for a great tragedy, but for a mythical world which you and I together retreat to escape our responsibility of sacrifice by worshiping it. We escape our responsibility of sacrifice by worshiping Hussein's sacrifice. Hussein is no longer an archetype for valor or for courage, a paragon of divine ethics to be broadcast to the world, a source of inspiration for self-improvement, but rather his station has been reduced to being an avenue for salvation for people like us, the undeserving. We are ready to mourn about Abdullah, but restive and defiant when it comes to putting into practice the message and principle of Ashura. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لما تقولوا ما لا تفعلون كبر مقتا عند الله أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلون. O you who possess faith, why do you say that which you do not do? Most hated in the sight of Allah is that what you say but you do not do. This is for all of us. Sometimes I feel that if the skies truly wept tears of blood and the ground shook from sorrow, they did so not because of Hussein, but because of us, because of you and I, because we are those who claim to honor his message, yet stand with cosmetic courage, moral indifference, and lay response, because we are those who offer our tears before our actions and deeds. In these days we hear various renditions of the philosophy of mourning, powerful addresses about the shortcomings of others, long and robust celebrations about the imperfectibility of our own ways. But we will remain absent-minded about the higher purpose and transcendental nature of Imam Hussein's struggle. I'm reminded of Sayyidah Zainab's, one of her many speeches in Kufa, where she said, amongst many things, she quoted a very interesting verse of the Quran. This was addressed to the people of Kufa. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِي نَقَضْ غَزْلَهَا مِنْ بَعْدِ قُوَّةٍ أَنْكَاثًا تَتَّخِذُونَ أَيْمَانَكُمْ دَخَلًا بَيْنَكُمْ. And be not like her who undoes the thread which she has spun after it has become strong, by taking your oaths as a means of deception amongst yourselves. This is addressed to the people of Kufa, and she went on and said many things, calling them people of fraud, deception, pretension, that never shall the lumps in their throat go away, and the rapid breaths of sorrow will never calm them. The traditions of sorrow that describe the literal sufferings of Hussein are important, no doubt about it. And they deserve our attention. The tragedy of Karbala naturally demands and evokes grief and mourning from any person with an open mind and open heart. Certainly, that's the case. And we have to preserve its remembrance, because to forsake its remembrance is to forsake Hussein minni wa ana min al-Hussein. That Hussein is from me and I am from Hussein, the tradition of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wa alihi. But we must provide space for thought, reflection, and debate. That is, we must provide a space for reason in the remembrance of Hussein. For it is through reason that we commit learnt ideas as principles to be practiced and revered by the heart. It is reason that enables us to choose truth amongst competing falsehoods, as the Ansar of Imam Hussein did. So our challenge is to find a way to reconcile our particularized understanding of Abu Abdullah, one that emphasizes sorrow as the most intimate channel to love Abu Abdullah, with a more universal understanding that emphasizes Hussein's call to revive and reform human affairs. That is a universal call, one that appeals to more beyond the people in this room and beyond those who resemble us in character and content, in language and ethnicity, or even in faith. That it should be a universal call that inspires us to bring forth with our minds and our hands, as much as from our hearts, of the message of Abu Abdullah. Imam Hussein, in written testimony to Muhammad ibn Hanafiya, he says, وَإِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشْرًا وَلَا بَطْرًا وَلَا مُفْسِدًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي وأبي علي بن أبي طالب. He says, indeed I have not risen up to do mischief, nor as an adventurer, nor to cause corruption or to establish tyranny. I have risen up solely to reform the ummah of my grandfather, and I want to command what is good and to forbid what is wrong. And in this I follow the conduct of my grandfather and my father. The remembrance of Hussein should reflect this principle, a message to revive the prophetic guidance. Hussein sought the inspiration of his father and grandfather to bring about reform in his time. We too should recover the timeless nature of Imam Hussein's endeavor and seek to bring about a change in our lives and our times. Hussein's struggle should be a source of inspiration for all those who face limits on their freedoms and rights, to the innocent who are falsely accused, to those who seek equality and opportunity, to those whose image is falsely distorted and slandered. Hussein's message and deed should be a source of support and strength for the most destitute and downtrodden. The bottom rungs of society that we have forgotten should call Hussein's name in remembrance. It's our responsibility to broadcast Hussein's message and to rekindle the transcendental nature of Imam Hussein's call. And we have to ensure that Hussein's rise was truly transformative and revolutionary. Not one that gave rise to a community that with great pageantry and uniqueness would adorn black and shelter themselves with grief and tears. We need to bring about a revival of the prophetic guidance in our time, in our actions. Let us not forget, Yazid is corruption. Yazid is poverty. Yazid is inequality. Yazid is abuse. Yazid is occupation. Yazid is discrimination. And most importantly, Yazid is disunity. There's a very beautiful verse in the Quran. It says, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is responding to the call of the Bedouin Arabs who used to say, Amana billah, we believe in God. And he says, no, you should rather say Aslamna, that you have submitted and that faith has not yet entered into your hearts. And so when you want to traverse the journey where you move from submission to faith, I think the example of the Ansar of Hussein is quite moving. Muslim ibn Awsaja was a companion of An-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He was known as a very pious elder and a reciter of the Quran. And I see a lot of his story in this verse of Quran. But how he reached faith, as there's another tradition that says faith is established through amal. And amal is a part of faith. And we see his first appearance in this story in Kufa as a deputy of Muslim ibn Aqil, where he's collecting alms and weapons for Imam Hussein and just generating support. That he was there at that time. But there are really two stories, and briefly I'll go over them, that I think are quite inspiring. The first is on the night of Ashura, when Imam Hussein had excused all of his companions to leave. That should they wish, it's not for them, this is not an obligation on them, it is between Hussein and Yazid. The first to speak was Muslim. And he pledged that he would do this 70 times over. He would pledge his spear and whosoever came in front of him. The first to speak. And then on the day of Ashura, he was the first to be shaheed. And while he lay, just clinging to the last moments of life after being struck, Habib ibn Madahir and Imam Hussein came to him. And Habib cradled him, and they exchanged, they're wishing blessings on one another. And Habib said to him that, O Muslim, had I not known that I would endure the same fate of you, I would have asked that you entrust me with your will, that I may carry it out. And this is where you see that connection of faith and amal. This is a man who's completely devoted to Abu Abdullah, even in the last moments of his life. Wasn't a blind devotion. And he pointed to Hussein. And he pointed to Imam Hussein and he said, this is what I entrust you with. It wasn't a blind devotion. In the last moments of his life, he knew exactly what was his purpose there and why he was doing that. And then Imam Hussein said to him this verse that I began with. It says, amongst the believers are men true to what they promised Allah. Among them is he who has fulfilled his vow to death. And among them is he who awaits his chance. And they did not alter in the terms of their commitment by any alteration. Sadaqallahu al-Azim.